Again, dealing with the Federal Reserve System, what it does, how it's set up, and the function that it has. Okay? Now again, this probably ain't going to take us an awful lot of time. This is pretty easy. We're just going to describe how this is set up. Okay? So, a couple things that we're going to need to know. So the Federal Reserve System is often called the Fed. That would be the first thing that I would like for you guys to jot down underneath the Federal Reserve, is that it's referred to as the Fed. And I think we've talked a little bit about this in here, haven't we?
Yeah.
Okay. It's referred to as the Fed, okay? Now, what exactly is the Federal Reserve System? If you notice, I have it underlined in that first statement there. It is the central banking system of the U.S. Now, that's important. Let's jot that down. It is the central banking system. So if I were to ask you who controls the money that comes in and out of our economy, you would tell me that that is who? The Federal Reserve, okay? So it is the central banking system of the United States. It says that the goal of the Federal Reserve is to help the economy achieve stable prices, full employment, and economic growth. So what is the goal? The goal of the Fed. And I would literally label these 1, 2, and 3, okay? The goals that it has, the first one, put down to achieve stable prices. So just put down stable prices. Second one is full employment. And then lastly, economic growth. I will be asking you that again, so make sure you know the goals of the Fed. Okay? Now, in order to obtain all that, they basically control the money supply. Okay, guys? So somewhere on your paper, write down that the Fed, or the Federal Reserve, controls the money supply. They try to make sure that the economy is not inflated or recessed or anything of that nature. They try to keep an even balance, okay? So they control the money supply, all right? So this next question is asking, it says, what is the goal of the Federal Reserve System? We've already wrote 3 of them down, right? And it already says them in that top part there. It says it's to help the economy achieve prices, full employment, and economic growth. So how do they go about doing that? That's the biggest question we got to try to answer. It says the Federal Reserve's responsibilities include conducting monetary policy, supervising and regulating financial institutions, and providing services to depository institutions, the federal government, and the public. Now, let's make all that simple. Where you wrote down that the federal government or the Fed controls the money supply, put down that they supervise, and it's the second one right there. They supervise and regulate financial institutions. Now that's what we've been talking about this week, is these financial institutions, right? So how would the Fed, the Federal Reserve System, regulate a bank in Carroll County? What do they put on? They probably tell them you can only give out X amount of money this month, or you have to charge this interest on big loans, or you can only give out loans to the people that meet these qualifications. Does that make sense? And if our banks don't do that, what would the Federal Reserve do? Quit supplying them with what? Money. See what I'm getting at? So that's how they regulate. That's important, that they regulate financial institutions to make sure that they're on the up and up. They're doing what they are supposed to be doing. Okay? Now, this next one here, it says, how is the Federal Reserve System structured? Now, this is these are easy when I ask you this on your test because it's pretty simple stuff. I know that map is pretty hard to see, but do you guys see those numbers? Let me flip the lights off so it'll make more, maybe you can see it better. In your notes there, it says how many of them are there? There are 12 Federal Reserves. Where are the vast majority of them located? On the east or west coast?
East.
Most of them's over this way. Makes sense. Not a lot of people live in this general area, do they? No. All right. So, what I would do in my notes is I would write down the word structure. And I would fill this part out underneath it. We already know what the goals of it are. We've got that part down. Okay? So how is it structured? Well, the first thing we need to know is how many of them there are. How many Federal Reserves does it say there are? 12. So put down 12 regional Federal Reserves. Was you guys the class that we got the dollar bill out with? And I showed you that number, and I said that number will tell you where it's from. You know, if it was a 12, it was from San Francisco all the way out in California. Talked about circular flow with it, how everything moves within the economy. So how does a dollar from California end up in Virginia? Simply because someone spent it and it just kept moving and moving and moving. Seen a thing last night on I think it was on TikTok. A guy was talking about things that's hard to believe. And it's like you never own money. It's just your turn to spend it. When you think about it like that, it's kind of crazy. You know what I'm saying? So, circular flow, but there are 12 regional reserves located across the U.S. All right. As far as their day-to-day stuff, each one of these branches carry out specific stuff for each region. You understand what I mean? Like San Francisco may deal with these 4 or 5 states. Kansas City may deal with these 3 or 4 states. Texas may deal with these 4 or 5 states. You see what I'm getting at? They deal with the day-to-day stuff like that. All right? So, the next part is, it says, what is the purpose of supervising and regulating functions of the Federal Reserve System? So what do they do? What is this idea of regulation? So, you've got structure down. All I need you to know there is that there are 12 of them. Okay? So the next part, put down their purpose and underline it. Now this one is the important one for today. What is the purpose that the Federal Reserve serves us? Yes, we know it supplies money and that it regulates banks, but how? How does it regulate banks? How does it supply money and so forth? You guys understand that? So the purpose. The first thing I want you to write down underneath purpose is the words monetary policy. It's up there on the board. And we need to know what that means. It says monetary policy can lead to changes in the supply of money and the availability of credit. Changes in the money supply can influence overall levels of spending, employment, and prices. Now, if you notice at the end of that, employment, prices, and growth fall into monetary policy, right? All that is goals of the Federal Reserve, okay? So what is monetary policy? Put down that it can change the supply of money. So beside a monetary policy, put down can change the supply of money. And the Federal Reserve has that ability, okay? Now, if we change the supply of money, you guys with me? If we say we're going to put this much into the economy, or the Federal Reserve is going to take this much out of the economy, all that's going to affect every type of spending that we have. Y'all got that? Just like charge cards, credit cards, debit cards, loans, things of that nature. So if you notice, it says changes in the money supply can influence overall levels of spending, employment, and prices. If we take money out of the economy, people aren't going to have as much to spend, right? So what are they going to do? Hang on to it for more important things, right? Well, if they're hanging on to it, what's happening to the demand for products?
Going up.
It's going up. No,
Down.
it's going down,
Yeah.
right? So what would happen to the price of those products? It would go down as well, right? So it puts people in a bind, okay? So the bottom part there, it says the Federal Reserve supervises and regulates banks to promote the safety and soundness of the banking system, to have a stable financial market, and to ensure applicable laws and regulations. So the only other thing underneath purpose that we're going to write down other than monetary policy is that they regulate banks to promote safety and soundness of the system. So they regulate, and it's in bold right there, regulate banks, the banks that you and I bank at. They regulate banks to promote safety and soundness of the banking system. Because you guys know as well as I do, if the banking system were to go under, where does that leave us?
Nowhere.
Not in a good situation, does it? Not in a very good situation at all. Okay? And then lastly, some of the services that the Federal Reserve have. So again, just write down the word services. Put a box around it or square it. So what do they do? Okay? So the first thing, put down that they supply paper money. Who are they supplying this to? Who are they supplying paper money to?
Banks.
Yeah. So they supply paper money and coins to banks. I actually probably should have wrote financial institutions there, but you guys get the idea. Okay. It says that they process checks and electronic payments, and they protect consumers through regulations and education. So let's skip that middle part where it says process checks and electronic payments, because you guys already know that every bank does that, right? So let's put down the last part there. They protect consumers, and that's the one that I'm going to need you to remember. Protect consumers. Who are consumers?
Us.
Us. Through regulations. If the Federal Reserve wasn't in place, could banks charge us any type of interest rate they wanted to? Yeah, they can make it really difficult if they had to. But hopefully they won't. Okay? So, just to give you an idea of the key points of this, okay? Here's my notes. Here's what they look like. I can find my highlighter. Just know that we refer to the Federal Reserve System as the Fed. Okay? Know the goals, which are these three concepts. Okay? The structure, know how many of them there are. Know what monetary policy is. And then basically what do they do? And those two are very important as well. Alright, can y'all see all that? So that's basically the biggest concepts of what we're dealing with. Federal Reserve isn't hard, guys. It's actually fairly simple stuff. Okay? So, does anybody have any questions about the quiz or the notes that we just took for today? Is everybody with me there? Alright, so on Monday, 8A kids, we'll continue through this. We'll get through 7B. I'll probably throw a quiz at them from 7A and 7B on Tuesday. On Wednesday, I will probably send you C, and then we'll just keep moving right along through it. Okay? So again, does anybody have any questions about that? Alright, so that's all we got for today.